I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:33. We'll start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to congratulate three of our council people on their election wins. Hard fought. Mr. Hawkins, this is term number
Four
for you. Thank you
or five.
Thank you for your dedication. Congrats on your election.
You know it's long.
Chad, you won your first real election.
That's right.
Thank you for running again, and congratulations for joining us. And then we have our newbie, if you will, Lindsay Hun. Thank you, Lindsay, for running. Congratulations on your win. So the first item is that you will all be sworn in. And do you want to do all three together?
Yeah, we can do all three together. They have their copies, and we can stand, raise our hands. Everybody can.
First you get sworn in, then you get sworn out.
Yes. I will never swear at any of you. If you guys want to raise your hands, and you can start with the Vermont Oath of Allegiance. I,
Chad Boudreaux, do solemnly swear that I will be true and faithful to the state of Vermont, and that I will not directly or indirectly
do any act or thing injurious to the Constitution of the government thereof,
therefore,
so help me
so help
God.
me God. Under pain and penalty of perjury.
Under pain and penalties of perjury.
thank you. And then you can do your oath of office. And go ahead and start. I,
Timothy Hawkins,
Chad
do
Boudreaux,
solemnly
do
swear
solemnly swear
that I will
that I
faithfully
will
execute the office of City Council member,
Council
Ward
as
1,
member of Ward 6
for the city of St. Albans, and will
and
thereon give equal right and
therein give
justice
equal rights and
to all
justice
persons
to all
to the best of my
persons to the
judgment,
best of my judgment and
ability,
ability, according to the law, so help me God,
under
under
the
pains and penalties of perjury.
good job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all.
You guys want to sign
That was so easy, much easier than last year.
that?
It's
Yeah.
printed out.
So we don't have to, poor Trudy got the worst of it.
Lindsay, remember, for the first 2 years, you don't talk, okay?
Thank you, guys.
It didn't work for her,
Good, I was
so
gonna
it's not gonna
say,
work for
Trudy
you.
didn't adhere to that.
You didn't tell me that rule.
I guess you called Hilton.
All right, we're going to move on to item number 3, public comment on any non-agenda items. So if there's any comment, we'd ask you to come up and join us and keep it to 2 minutes. And we had no guest, Sarah,
Correct.
so we, not seeing anyone jumping to the table, so we're going to bypass item number 3. And now we're going to move to a legislative report from Representative Joe Luno. Joe, thanks for reaching out and making a point to come join us. If you want to
Oh, thank you.
come sit up here.
Well, it would appear you're off to a good start if there's no public comment.
Yeah.
So, well, I'd like to start by correcting the member from Ward 1. It's actually your 6th term.
Thank
You got on in 2010. So this would be number 6th time around the 3-year.
I didn't want to tell anybody, but thanks for letting that out.
And I would,
Problem.
add, time served on the planning commission.
Yeah, and zoning board of adjustment, which it was called back then, before the DRB,
How many years?
since 1995.
Yes, we used to have some interesting
Joe and I were on
conversations there
those
for a
committees
bit.
together. Yeah.
I was around just for the tail end of that.
So thank you for your service, Mr. Hawkins.
But thank you very much for having me. And I know I spoke to Representative Toof, and he has a conflict that he would like to be considered in the future. So just for the record, I'm Joe Luno. I think I pretty much know you all, but I serve St. Albans City, Franklin 3, which is wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's really the entire city. It's not as though I have disregard for wards 5 and 6. And just a few things, and it's not comprehensive, but from a legislative update perspective, Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Manahan contacted myself and Representative Toof regarding what I agree with is an unfair grading metric for the Agency of Transportation paving grant program, which frankly is myself and Representative Toof discovered and you knew already, or I should miraculously say confirmed, is that we're in District 8 for the Agency of Transportation, and paving grant money scoring is based strictly on how many miles of Class 2 roads the community has, and there's no consideration for the intensity of the use of those roads. I did take it a step further and spoke with the respective chairs of Transportation, House and the Senate, and best I can tell, there's not a whole lot of appetite for changing that formula at this time. What we did find out, and I believe the city's cognizant of and working with, is that although they're not actually Class 2 roads based on whatever the AOT formula is, the city may reclassify around 1.3 miles of Class 3 road to Class 2 road, which based on data that staff sent over would get the city, not a lot, but another $3,800 a year in annual paving reimbursements. But more importantly, would make the city about 30% more competitive in the paving grant program. The city currently has not quite 3.8 miles of Class 2. You sent it to me, so 3.787 is the number. And the city's eligible to have 5.087. So what does that mean? There are 30 communities in District 8. Currently, the city is 29th out of 30 in priority for grant consideration. And with that reclassification, we'd be in the middle of the pack. Furthermore, it looks likely that the city would be is a likely funder for FY27. So that'd be for paving beginning July 1st of next year. So.
You said reclassify 1.3, 1.2 miles?
I had sent the information over to, I believe Chip,
Yeah.
Sarah, and Marty had it, and I don't know who the applicable parties would be to do that, but there's some mileage the city can reclassify. It's around 1.3.
Well, my question to you, Joe, is there certain streets that would fall under that, or is that just a sort of a formula to get to?
I would leave that to, city staff and the Agency of Transportation. I didn't get that.
There's a statutory definition of the different classes, and I
Right.
think Joe's saying, looking at that definition, we could probably shoehorn some into Class 2.
Yeah, so apparently a Class 2 road usually connects two Class 1 roads, and that's always been my understanding of it. However, for Agency of Transportation reimbursement and grant consideration, a Class 3 road might be a Class 2 road, which means it only connected to a Class 1 road on one side. But I thought that piece would better be left to the applicable parties, which I'm kind of an intermediary in this instance.
We're gonna look into it.
Yeah, for sure.
The timing for reclassification is in December. And I'm happy to forward any information I have about it, but I did send what I knew back in January. And Michelle Boomauer was the individual who I was interfacing with. Secondly, may create some relief for the city this year, the local option tax. And we're certainly a community who benefits from that. Of the 1% of the various local option taxes, the way that currently works is the municipality which elects to collect that tax receives 70% of the point, and the state gets the other 30%. There's a bipartisan bill in House Ways and Means whereby that ratio is going to change, and I'm not sure, to either 80-20 or 75-25. And that's likely going to happen this year. City staff sent forward the current local option tax numbers, and depending on which way that lands, a 25 would mean another $54,000 to the city based on FY24 local option tax revenues. And the 20 would mean, 80-20 would be a little over 100 grand, which is not what it used to buy.
Yeah.
But it's still $100,000 that wasn't planned for, so. There's another question of monies that were collected in excess of what the state needed to administer the program, in which case, how do you give those back out? I have not been able to get a clear answer on that. And I think that would be a little more difficult to unravel, because different communities espouse different parts of local option taxes at different times. But that's a likely source of additional revenues for the city. And, you know, frankly, if I'm sitting in the State House, I'm doing my best to look out for the best interest of Vermonters, but I'm also represent Albans City. So whatever we can find to get home, we endeavor to do that. So those are the two more granular things I had. Education funding and governance reform. You know, you hear all kinds of things. And I hear from the member from Ward 4 with some regularity. I'm advised it's going to be more.
Thanks for your number.
The only thing that I've heard, the governor's plan would envision consolidation to 5 school districts. There's an alternate plan in the Senate, which appears to have bipartisan support, which would support something around 9 districts. I think technically it'd be 6 districts and 3 unions. But I think that is, you know, stay tuned, but that's a likely outcome from this.
Do we get separated from Chittenden County in that?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, the 5 district plan, we don't.
Yeah.
And the 9 district plan is really 6 districts and 3 unions, and I think the unions are more for the traditional private schools like Burton and St. Jay.
Yeah.
I am not expert on the subject. The governor's plan hit the House 2 weeks ago, something like that. It's a 194-page bill or something like that. The alternative district plan comes from a senator from, I believe, Bennington County, who's the Democratic House Chair, or excuse me, Senate Chair of Education. Needless to say, there are a lot of committees, things they're gonna have to travel through before they reach fruition. But that's really only tangible thing that I've seen. You've heard things talking about student ratios based, and I've heard very little more than anybody else sitting here may have. And I actually spoke to Representative too, because he sits in House Education, and he hasn't heard a whole lot more testimony than I have. I sit in corrections and institutions, so we talk about, you know, state maintenance of state buildings, maybe a little bit of county fair stuff, and our corrections institutions. So education things are not going to come through my committee. But that said, you know, Representative 2's committee is education, and there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about funding and governance reform. There is concurrence that the way we fund education now is not sustainable. I don't think I've found many parties who disagree with that. But once you get beyond that, there are different opinions. So I'm happy to come back from time to time if you would like for me to. I held a placeholder for public safety, because I know it's an issue near and dear to my heart, and certainly is something that becomes concerned in St. Albans City, and it seems so particularly as the weather gets nicer, which it's about to. House Judiciary is interested in the reinstitution of work crew or something akin to it, with the intent of having some kind of, well, frankly, alternate deterrent to incarceration for things like, you know, theft or other non-felonious bad behavior that nonetheless is a, you know, it's just it's a nuisance to our community at the very least. That's the most positive thing I have seen. Most of the time in House Judiciary, which is one room away from me, has been talked about discussion about raise the age, which is basically the notion that a 19 or eventually a 21-year-old would be treated as a minor. The governor's been very clear, he's not supportive of that. There are not votes to advance that anywhere. So that's unfortunate, but that's where we are right now. So along the lines of what we can do, and which I try to concentrate more on than what we can't, is that you may see some form of alternate sentencing to incarceration to act as a deterrent to, some of the stuff that hopefully we don't see on the streets, but like we will when the weather turns. I remember at one time I owned a building in a part of town that I won't identify, but let's just say it wasn't as nice in the summer as it was in the winter. And I'd show an apartment in February and somebody would think it was fine, and I would explain to them exactly what they could expect once it got nice out. And it's like it didn't register with them, and about half the time they would want to leave. So stay tuned in that regard. If there are any matters that the city feels that myself or any members of the delegation could advocate with, we're happy to do so to the best of our ability. That's about what I had to speak about this evening. I know you have a long agenda. I'm happy to
Is there,
answer anything I can.
you're on the corrections board, is there any movement to having some sort of detox facility? Like St. Albans doesn't detox people anymore, like they don't have like I guess the old school thing was a drunk tank when I was in the bar business. And I think police now have to let a lot of things kind of go because they can't warehouse them in the station all night. Is there any plans to provide more resources?
The proposed corrections budget is about $235 million. It's about, give or take 10% of the state general fund is used up in corrections. There is discussion right now, and I know you're talking about detox facilities, but let's talk about residential opiate use disorder facilities and what was the St. Johnsbury work group. Mm-hmm. There's little or no talk from anybody about residential detox facilities for people who haven't committed felonies, which is basically how you become incarcerated in the state of Vermont. It's very, very difficult to become incarcerated unless you hurt somebody for the most part. Data we saw showed from the Department of Corrections showed 63 people sentenced for some kind of drug distribution. There's one person sentenced in the state of Vermont for drug use, who I assume pleaded down. Either that or had the worst lawyer on the East Coast. For the most part, you think about murders, aggravated assault, rapes, things that home invasions, things less than that, people are just not incarcerated for in the state of Vermont. The other thing is, currently it costs about $107,000 for somebody to be incarcerated here. Our contract in the state of Mississippi, it costs about $40,000. And beyond that, the people in Mississippi by their own surveys, have a better experience because Vermont is one of the few states where detained and sentenced individuals are housed together. In most places, it's not true. So in Mississippi, it's only sentenced individuals. And the average detainee stay is about 3 days. Obviously, they're somewhere there for years, on larger charges. But to point, it creates living condition issues that wouldn't exist in a sentence-only living environment. And so the question becomes, why is almost 40% of our population detained and not sentenced? Because if you're not sentenced, you're not eligible to go out of state. And that goes into a lot of things, like getting people to court dates. I know we've requested 6 more sheriffs to transport people to court. And I'm certainly not expert in that entire system, but we have a major backlog with sentencing people with more serious crimes. And then who might be eligible to, if there's an appetite to do so, to do time out of state, which could then free up resources for things like, residential detox. And, maybe residential detox for somebody who's living with opiate use disorder but hasn't done anything awful. Because I think it's also reasonable to expect that people who are living in general population are afforded the same opportunities as those who are incarcerated. That would not be equitable for it to be the other way around. So those are some questions that we grapple with. Either people on my committee or the opinion that there should be no corrections institutions. I am not of that opinion, and I don't think the majority of my committee is. But fair enough question, Chad. I wish I had a clear answer for you.
How about anything on judicial oversight? It seems to me that the judiciary is going overboard to delay sentencing and delay trials in favor of the defendant. And that's what's probably causing the backlog in the judicial system, from my perspective. And there is some type of judicial oversight committee, I think.
There is.
And why aren't they acting to reprimand? I mean, we finally get a judge who's going to start incarcerating these people and sentencing them, and a large contingency comes out to get rid of them.
Chapter of this county.
That's right. And so I'm just wondering, what's the governor doing to? Because he's the one who appoints the Judiciary Oversight Committee, isn't he?
At least in part, I don't know what the entire composition of that is.
So maybe if he were to look into that a little more, he would probably solve some of his backlog issue.
It's a good question, Tim, and I don't have a good answer for you, so I can look into it. Well, maybe not the proper term, but the Superior Court Judge Overseer, his last name is Zone. I've seen him a few times, and he'll tell you that, each judge is their own fiefdom per se, and that there isn't a whole lot of ability for oversight.
But there is a Judicial Retention Committee after that if there's a big enough complaint.
There certainly is.
They won't be there for very long.
Those are not lifetime appointments, with the exception of, I think the Supreme Court may be an exception,
yeah.
But the others is not the case.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the legislative judicial review or judge review. I think there should be a better system.
It's called, I call that no review.
I mean, if someone has a bone to pick, then it's going to happen.
Well, it becomes political, so that's why a lot of things like, clean water and conservation, housing monies, the legislature may allocate, grant monies to a board, but we don't earmark things for the most part, is that it becomes, a lot of times who you have connections with in the room making the calls, and it's probably not the best way to do things.
Well, I know that's not your committee, but if you could just look into that and just see what's up, give us a rundown.
I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, because we certainly aren't getting anywhere.
And in the case of that particular committee, I'm literally 15 feet away.
Yeah.
And we have Representative Oliver from Sheldon is in that committee. So
I think in the work that I've done with the Public Safety Committee, we've talked to a lot of people. It sounds like the court system and the judges are doing business like they always have done. They have their hour lunch, they work from this hour to this hour, and there's not a lot of maybe flexibility in their scheduling to make sure that they're getting to more cases than just like one at a time. Some towns do drug court where it's like groups of people being sentenced, I guess, at once. Is there, what committee would think about like how are judges doing their work?
well, it's a judiciary issue.
And if it's remained the same, like for the last 50 years, times have changed, so maybe thinking about how they could do things differently, more efficiently?
That's certainly not in my immediate purview, but I'd be more than happy to look into it. And there's a very strong interaction between judiciary and how corrections functions. So So we've had a joint meeting with judiciary, and it was regarding the relationship between live trial transport and virtual trials in correctional facilities. There's maybe not a yes or a no. One of the issues in correctional facilities is that there is not Wi-Fi comprehensively throughout any of the facilities, which creates other issues. I'd be more than happy to look into it truly. I'm not knowledgeable enough about the subject to comment further.
I think the other safety one I wanted to bring up too was outside of judiciary, was vehicle safety. We've seen a lot more of an uptick in reckless driving, people that are just, well, we had incidents in crosswalks, we've had incidents of kids almost getting hit by cars going off the road in telephone poles, we had the unfortunate accident that happened recently on 93-1. What is the legislation doing looking at some of the vehicle safety components as far as public education, as far as enforcement? Are there any movements at all?
Well, driving to Montpelier in the morning, if I'm driving 78, I'm usually getting tailgated. So, and I have no data, but between the Newski exit and the Shelburne Road exit, you want to have like an extra set of eyeballs or a spotter, because it's awful. A lot of law enforcement individuals I speak with will tell you that they just don't have time to deal with it. I know we've heard that here from the city this past summer. It's not that they don't care about it, it's just that they're not in a proactive situation whereby they can do it. I know that, personally, I commute in my normal life north on High Street from Congress to go to work, and a few years ago, I did not take time to make a full stop at one of those streets, and I was pulled over by city PD, and I was given a warning at that time. I do come to a complete stop, and I look down the streets, and I suspect, I don't know this, I just don't have time to do traffic enforcement. I suspect that's the case throughout a lot of the state.
Well, and a lot of that goes back to funding too, so is the state, looking at that as well. And then the other component is enforcement, because we have a lot of laws in place, like tinted windows for people that just don't think they're being watched, and they don't know who you are, so they're jumping stop signs in front of people, and you get that report regularly, but yet that's being installed in vehicles, it's against law, but there's no enforcement of it. So it's like, what is the state doing then? If we have these laws in place, get rid of them. It's like they don't be enforced, then what are we going to do?
Yeah, I know, there's some folks who want to do a statewide noise ordinance for vehicles. And I would concur with you in regard that there should be no ordinances made that can't be enforced.
We have, if you go to statewide noise, we have signs that you can use if you want.
Put it right in front of Tim's house.
Well, I know you hear it, Trudy, I haven't heard of it, but we get some folks throwing through the headers in the summer. I'm sure Marty hears them.
Marty yelled at him once and then it got better.
I don't hear very well, and I hear them.
I was gonna say, where you live, you probably hear at 9:30 every night, right off the
Yeah, but if I hear them inside my house, that means they're loud, because I
know where he lives.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I see Representative Walker from Swanton. He's a House Trans Chair. I know they're just getting the transportation bill out. That'll be a priority for next week, and there's some other, but they look into things like state inspection law. But actual road enforcement, I don't have.
Yeah, just quickly, and then we'll let you go, Joe, but I think.
Yeah, I don't want to.
For me, I think, to add to Eric's point, no insurance. The penalties for no insurance are almost non-existent. I mean, there should be something a lot heavier.
Well, no insurance in the state of Massachusetts if you're found to be driving in that way. Your car gets towed, your plates get pulled.
We don't have plates on cars around here, so whatever.
Why do you have to be found to do that? Why do you have to be found? I find it ironic that if I don't pay my insurance for my house, the bank's calling me, right? Because the bank knows I didn't pay my insurance. So why is it the Department of Motor Vehicles can't find out if the car insurance isn't being paid?
Proof of insurance for registration.
New York.
Yeah, I mean,
So if the insurance is not being paid, someone drops their insurance, then
uphold your
DMV should be notified. DMV should then contact the motor vehicle operator. Your license is suspended. Please find out, and then we go ahead with those increased penalties. But we don't do that here, so.
we don't.
Yeah.
Joe, thanks for coming in. We're gonna move on here. Thanks for reaching
Joe.
out to get on the agenda. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck with the balance of your agenda.
We'll be glad to have you again at the end of the session,
Yep.
if not before.
With Representative Toof, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, thank you.
We're moving on to item number 5. That would be Alina Korsak with EBIZ and Sarah, if you want to step up. And everyone should have your comprehensive financial report in front of you. And Sarah, thank you for having
You're
everything.
welcome.
That's going to be a nice addition. Thank you. So we'll turn it over to you two.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Alina, for coming out and joining us. So I'm joined tonight by Alina Korsak, who's a managing partner, managing director at our auditing firm, which had been Melanson and Heath, then Melanson and Markham, and now CBiz, but we are still fortunate to have the same awesome team of auditors out of the New Hampshire office, right? Come up and join us every year. We are going to take you on a journey through the FY24 financial statements this evening, but first it'll be my annual attempt to make accountants out of all of you with a brief whirlwind primer on governmental accounting. What I'd like to start with this evening is pointing out to you that there are 3 different rule-making bodies in this country around accounting standards. The FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board, makes the rules for business organizations, and along the way decided, governments are really different enough to need their own standard-setting body. And in comes the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, established in 1984, and that's the standard-setting body that we fall under. Just a quick note here, the federal government decided they were different enough to warrant their own board, and so they fall under even a 3rd standard-setting group. It may seem intuitive to everyone in this room, certainly I think anyone who has worked in state or local government, that government plays a fundamentally different role in society than business does. The best way I've heard this described is that business provides goods and services to raise revenue, but governments raise revenue to provide goods and services demanded by their constituents. Really what this summarizes in one sentence is that we exist in a world where there are no shareholders. There's an absence of a defined ownership interest in the local government. If the city were to somehow go out of business, there would not be a residual distribution to the taxpayers. We also don't talk about shareholder equity the way a business might. We exist in a non-exchange environment, which effectively means that taxpayers pay in based on the value of their property, not based on the value of services they may receive in a year, right? We all decide through the budget process that this is what it's going to take to run the government this year, and we all contribute in part based on the value of property being our largest revenue source. There are some pretty high barriers to exit. If you don't like your taxes, you have to move. It's not that easy to up and find a new house, especially if you happen to have a COVID-era mortgage interest rate. You might be less inclined to do that. We don't face competition, and ultimately the power rests with the voters. All this being said, the financial statements strive to meet these 6 financial reporting objectives. Unlike a business where we define success as return on investment, profit margin, change in stock price over time, we're not looking at those same items in the government. With the non-exchange transaction environment that we live in, or that we operate in, accountability rises to the top of this list. We have to justify to our financial statement users why we raised those resources and what we did with them. We talk about, moving down this list here, interperiod equity. We want to know if our current year revenues and other inflows were sufficient to cover current year costs, or are we kicking the can down to future taxpayers' deficit, or are we pulling in more money than we actually need in a surplus? That's not really a concept we get when we evaluate business financial statements. In government, we also are bound by our budget, and so we have a subset in the financial statements that shows our budget to actual. And we also are reporting on both long-term and short-term financial results here. All in all, the document is designed to support decision makers at all levels. So that was quite a comprehensive list of objectives. How do we do that in one document? Well, as you can see, it's a considerable size document. And it actually contains 2 separate sets of financial statements, which give you two different perspectives on the same operations. In this document, well, in a section of this document, we have both the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements. If you turn with me, please, to the blue tab. Sorry, Alina, I didn't tab yours. This is the front and back. It's a two-page government-wide financial statement. These summarize the operations of the city into two broad categories: governmental activities and business-type activities. And from here, yellow, pink, green, and orangish yellow are all of the fund financial statements. And I've highlighted the fund financial statements in this infographic because that's where we spend most of our time. That's the level at which we talk about on a quarterly basis when we review the operations of the general fund and the enterprise funds, when we perform the budget, when we're looking at individual capital projects, and so on. The fund financial statements, some of them use a different basis of accounting. If you would humor me and take your blue tab sheet and just lift it up a little bit so you can also see your yellow tab sheet, governmental activities on the blue page and total governmental funds on the yellow page actually are reporting on the exact same set of activities. And as you can see, the numbers are significantly different, even just looking at the bottom line of $63.5 million compared to $19.6 million. What is happening there? We are, let's see, in that, where did we go here? Sorry, I need to get back on my notes. I have a tendency to run away with myself. These governmental funds use a separate basis of accounting. So yellow tab uses a type of accounting called modified accrual accounting. And you're not going to find this anywhere outside of the GASB. This is a near-term focus that really looks at these concepts of accountability, legal and budgetary constraints, interperiod equity with a short-term lens. Did we bring in enough revenue this year to pay for current year expenses? The main difference here are things like long-term assets are expensed when they're purchased instead of capitalized on the balance sheet. Long-term debt, when we issue debt, it's an inflow on the income statement instead of creating a new liability on the balance sheet. And when we pay down that debt, it's also an outflow. So those numbers in the blue tab and the yellow tab are so different because one is looking at a long-term view of the government as a whole, the other is looking more at a short-term view. So I've used the word fund a number of times. Fund accounting is a method of bookkeeping specific to governments. Technically speaking, a fund is a financial accounting and reporting entity with its own set of self-balancing accounts. And to me, what that means is each fund is almost a mini business of the city, and I could pluck any one of them out and present a balance sheet income statement, a complete balanced set of financials for any one of those individual activities. Fund accounting is a practical way of keeping track of our legal and statutory requirements. It's also really helpful internally if we have a new project coming online. Think of any of the capital projects we've done in recent memory. We likely have a separate fund to account for that. So we can easily say, well, what have we spent to date on this specific item? Have we brought in the revenue sources that we anticipated? What needs to be billed, etc. Just for your general awareness, there are multiple types of funds that are available to us. The city doesn't use all of them, but we do use quite a bit. And as of yesterday, we have 24 active funds that we're managing. All right, we already covered this. The last piece of information I'd like to share with you before we get into the financial statements is about equity. And so the equity category in the government is called something different depending on what statement you're looking at. In the government-wide financial statements and in the fiduciary and the proprietary funds, water, sewer, water, sewer, and stormwater, we look at a net position number. But in the general fund, which is what I want to focus on right now, we call it fund balance. Equity, strictly speaking, is just the difference between our assets and liabilities. It's a mathematical calculation, and it grows each year if inflows exceed outflows, and it decreases if outflows exceed inflows. That being said, there may be a variety of constraints placed on those residual funds. For example, if we have salt and sand inventory at the end of the year of $50,000, that is an asset. That is something that we own, but we can't really go down to Ace Hardware and spend that. We got a bucket of sand, we'll exchange it for something. That is equity position, that's a non-spendable form. So we have salt and sand inventory, we don't have an offsetting liability. Mathematically, that contributes to our fund balance, but it's not really available for us to spend. Non-spendable is only one of multiple types of constraints that could be placed on the use of these residual funds. Moving in from non-spendable form, we have restricted, which are constraints placed on us through outside parties, so debt covenants, grantors, donors, down to committed, which would be restrictions placed at the highest level of local control. Through our fund balance policy, we consider those council-directed funds or voter-directed funds, followed by assigned, earmarked internally, and then unassigned is just everything else. There is information in your annual comprehensive financial report on page 32 and 69 on the fund balance of the city. All right. You will all have enough to pass the quiz tomorrow. And we're going to move into the financial report. So you have an annual comprehensive financial report. This is an expanded version of basic financial statements. The basic financial statements are in the middle. They're the financial section. And that is the minimum requirement for external financial reporting under the GASB. The city has expanded this to the comprehensive financial report to include an introductory section that has narrative information, a letter of transmittal from management, our table of contents. It has information about the org chart and the entity as a whole. And then on the end, we have a very useful statistical section. What makes the statistical section so useful is that it has 10 years of comparative data. When you look at the basic financial statements in the middle, you may notice that there's not any comparative data. There are so many columns as it is with every little fund that we don't even have space to look at what happened last year. And so short of pulling up last year's report and trying to compare, we can see in the statistical section 10-year trends of demographic, economic, financial, and other data. It's not required in the state of Vermont to have an annual comprehensive financial report, although it is required elsewhere and is held to be the professional standard. We're very pleased to have put this together. We've submitted it to the Government Finance Officers Association for review this year. This will be the 10th out of the last 12 years that we have done that, and we are hoping to round out our plaque of awards this year, and we should know this summer. A note here for all of you as you're reading this trying to sleep later this week. Here are some pages that you may find interesting. And now, some numbers. Let me get this right out of the bag. Where are we? First up, meeting the objective of budgetary compliance. So the required budget to actual comparison summarized on this screen can be found on page 84 of your report, and you can see at the bottom right-hand corner, I have reconciled this to what's reported in the ACFR is the acronym, the audit report. One of the things I'd like to point out is the way we look at the general fund for internal purposes and for the voter-approved budget is slightly different than the way it's reported in the financial statements. Internally, when we talk about general fund, we talk about the Restorative Justice Center as being part of the general fund that's included in the voter-approved budget. And then when we report out for financial statement reporting purposes, the Restorative Justice Center is its own special revenue fund, and then we lump in our redevelopment activity with the general fund as well. What this table shows you in the top segment is that in FY24, our revenues were about $1.5 million higher than anticipated, and our expenditures were about $1.4 million higher than anticipated, creating a fund balance increase of about $130,000. These overages relate to the sale of Fonda and retiring the associated debt, inflows and outflows related to the lead up of the town police contract starting, and operations of the Weldon Theater, which were not reflected in the budget numbers. Okay. Are there any questions on this before I move on to the next slide? Okay. Speaking of that increase to fund balance, what I've displayed here for you are the fund balance in the general fund balance as a whole, and then the individual categories of fund balance that we just had the whirlwind discussion about, non-spendable, restricted, committed, etc. What you can see here is that our total fund balance remains positive. It's about $750,000 at the end of the year. This is the left-hand side graph, the purple bars. And on the right-hand side, what you can see is that even though this is very similar to where we were in 22, there's been a shuffling amongst the categories. Specifically in 24, the Welded Theater building, which is reported as an asset held for resale while we're still figuring out what we're going to do with it, was moved into the redevelopment fund. Assets held for resale, like salt and sand inventory, can't be spent, and so they are non-spendable fund balance items. Because math, increasing non-spendable and keeping the bottom line the same, unassigned, it takes the brunt of that change. So you can see the green bar going up in the non-spendable and down in the unassigned. Overall fund balance remains steady and above zero. Questions? You guys dream about accounting tonight. One of our major funds on the yellow tab sheet that we always call out separately is the TIF Debt Service Fund. This is a fund used to record all of the debt payments on our TIF debt and related TIF revenues. Our related TIF revenues are the 100% of the municipal TIF increment, the 75% of education TIF increment, and sometimes there are transfers of other items into this fund as well. For example, in this year we transferred in interest earned on unspent debt proceeds, and that helped to offset the cost of this year's TIF debt as well. All in all, the TIF Debt Service Fund is trucking along as planned, and it aligns nicely with what we have provided to BEPC. The enterprise funds, we do spend a lot of time on general fund stuff, but we don't want to forget our enterprise funds. They start on the pink tab in your book. The enterprise funds, water, wastewater, and stormwater, the equity position of these funds is divided into 3 categories. We report on our net investment in capital assets, which is the depreciated value of our capital assets, less any outstanding debt we have on them. We also could have restricted net position, so items that have external restrictions on them. In our case, we do not. And then lastly, everything else is an unrestricted net position. For the city's purposes, unrestricted net position is the category where our reserve accumulation happens in each of these funds. And so if any of you were to ask me what are the reserves in water, wastewater, or stormwater, I would look right at unrestricted net position in the audited financial statements, and that's the number that I would give to you. Long-term debt outstanding. A quick note here starting on page 64 in your financial report, there's a breakdown of debt by debt item, including the balance outstanding and the retirement date. The council has asked me for a summary of that information in the past, and that comes directly out of the footnote starting on page 64. This slide has been broken up by the type of debt that we have, governmental activities debt, funded through property taxes, local option taxes, or redevelopment funds. TIF debt, specific to our TIF district, and as you can see, that middle green bar has jumped in 24 with the final issuance of our TIF debt, and then debt related to our business type activities. They're broken down this way so that we can understand the balances as they relate to the funding source. The second largest liability that the city has is its net pension liability. The net pension liability shown on this screen is essentially the value of all future benefits due less the value of money on hand now to pay benefits. I've heard this likened to the mortgage balance on your house. So if you look at your monthly mortgage statement, not the amount you owe each month, but the total amount that you owe over the next 30 years or so. It's nice to know what that amount is, and we sure know what that is here, but what you're required to pay is the monthly payment, and over time, when you introduce the element of time, you get to funding this balance. So I know this is a large number, but I would like to reiterate that the element of time isn't very well reflected in this graph. We have funding strategies for both of the plans that we're a part of that ensure that these will be solvent over their life. The city reports on 2 plans. The majority of our current employees and all future employees are part of VEMRS, which is the Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System. This is a multi-employer cost sharing plan. Every single employer and employee is required to submit a certain percentage of payroll. We do that without exception. It's governed by a board of directors, and they tell us what we have to submit every year to meet their funding targets. The city also has a closed single employer plan. This has about 50 retirees drawing benefits and a half a dozen active employees in it. We work with an actuary and an investment advisor to ensure that the value of the assets and contributions over time in this plan will be sufficient to pay the benefits until the plan is completely retired. Our funding strategy in a nutshell is we have assets on hand right now. We contribute about $250,000 a year. And as we spend down those assets on our annual benefit payments, right about here would be 2047 when our assets run out and our annual benefit payments start being $250,000 or less. And so we are in a spot where we're going to pay a stable amount over time, and that amount is going to meet up with our annual benefit payments, and then will be on a pay-as-you-go or a cash basis as the plan falls off. And obviously as we get closer to 2047, we will be evaluating this to make sure all the numbers still match up. This is dependent on many assumptions, including what's happening in the markets.
Sarah, you've agreed to stay until 2047, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
No comment. Right? Dom, I've agreed to stay as long as you.
Lindsay, you got that?
Write that in the notes.
Lindsay will be here.
Cut that.
Well, that's good. The mayor and I have the same deal, so.
The last few slides of my presentation talk about our TIF agreed upon procedures. So in addition to our financial statement audit, we are required to engage our auditors to perform agreed upon procedures. These are procedures agreed upon by the Vermont Economic Progress Council and the State Auditor's Office so that they can be assured that each year municipal TIF districts are in compliance with TIF statutes and TIF rules. I've summarized some of the things that are happening during those procedures. There are a number of tests to confirm and verify the figures we are using. And for 8 of the 9 years that we have been doing this, we have had no exceptions. The very first year of an agreed upon procedures report was fiscal 2016, and there was one exception, which was there had been an amendment to the original taxable value that VEPSI had signed off on, but that had not been programmed into our accounting system at the time of the agreed upon procedures. That was rectified shortly thereafter, and from that point on, we've gotten an A+. That concludes my whirlwind presentation, and I would let Alina chime in on anything you would like to add, and we'd be happy to take questions from the council.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. Good evening. I'm happy to be here. As Sarah mentioned, this is a great document you produced this year, and I think one of the great successes, because the last 2 years were basic financial statements, so going back to the annual comprehensive financial report was great. What we do is the financial statement auditors, we provide an opinion on the amounts and disclosures in the basic financial statements, which are the middle portion, as Sarah mentioned. And what we do is basically procedures to conclude, which did conclude with an unmodified opinion, which is basically the only thing that belongs to us in this ACRA is our independent auditor's opinion. It's unmodified opinion. I just want to make sure everyone is aware that that opinion is on the financial statements, the financial statement audit. We do not provide an opinion on internal control. This is not an internal control examination. We were here during preliminary July 15th week, and then we came back to do field work October 7th week. We communicated and responded with items and questions throughout that time through December, and I just want to say what a big success for the finance department. I'm very pleased with the timeliness. Not only were you timely, but we will make sure the auditor was timely. So I just think this is great that ACRA was filed on time in December. The due date was December 31, so there was no extension needed. It went really well. Our audit went well. Now, other than the independent auditor's report that we gave unmodified opinion for, the 3 other reports we issued is the single audit report. There's a calculation on how much needs to be audited when you receive federal awards and for the expenditures of those federal awards. And we have to, as an your independent auditors also give you the single audit report. So there is a team in our office that does the single audit report, and they provided me with this report. And the only thing really to mention here is report, no findings. The only thing you'll know, but the no for all the places where you could have findings, is at the bottom where it says auditor qualified as a low risk auditee. It said no, but the only reason you were considered high risk is because in fiscal year 22 there was a finding, and basically you have to stay clean for 2 years before it can be called low risk again. So that's it on a single audit report. The other report we provided you was the governance letter. You know, the governance letter is just our required communication that we are required to give you per ASCPA, basically saying we didn't have any disagreements, we didn't have any issues. It's all stated here, the governance letter, as Sarah mentioned, some of these, like pension, for example, requires estimates. So typically we put what we think are most sensitive estimates, the net pension liability, the fair value of investments, so, and just some smaller ones for collectability of receivables and lives of assets. But that's basically the governance letter. We didn't provide a separate management letter this year. We provided that in the past. Now, management letter is only required for significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Other recommendations don't have to be in writing, and you don't have to have a management letter. If you have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, they can be just disclosed in a governance letter. You can see from this governance letter that there isn't any, so there are no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we noted. So it's a clean governance letter as well, and so everything clean. And the last report, as Sarah mentioned, was the TIF report, and Sarah nicely summarized the 6 procedures there. The 7th procedure is really producing this report. So there were no exceptions here either, and that basically is all the reports we produced for you, and Sarah did such an amazing job. I thought it should be brief, so this is it.
Thank you. Yeah. Questions from the council?
So who do we distribute this to?
Who do you want to distribute it to?
Well, do we, all our banks?
I thought you meant my PowerPoint.
Well, no.
Okay.
Because she will let you send it to
I would,
me.
absolutely. I'll give you the unabridged version. So the financial report is on our website. It is provided, the single audit is provided to all of our pass-through grantors at the state level. Any other funders who ask for it when we apply for funding through the bond bank, our local bank gets a copy of it, and then we submit it to the National Professional Organization to be reviewed for excellence in financial reporting.
How many roughly would you hand out?
Well, I handed out 7 tonight.
No, but I mean for financial.
Maybe 2 dozen.
What does it mean to be high risk? You said we were
In
high
the
risk in
single
2020.
In the single audit, Alina, maybe let me dust the cobwebs off a little bit, and then you can jump in when I get it wrong. But in the single audit, so we spend regularly $750,000 or more in federal funds each year, and therefore we are required to have what we call a single audit, which is it's a yellow book audit. It's a federally directed audit of these funds, and when they're looking at which programs to review, they have to cover a certain amount of the funds that we spent, and they can determine if we are high risk or low risk. Some of the things that make you a high risk are maybe it's your first single audit, so you don't really know what you're doing. Or you got a finding in the prior year, which we did get a finding in 2022. I think we missed one of our federal funding sources. We had a considerable amount of turnover and tumult in the couple of departments in this building, and it just slipped through the cracks, so we got a finding. And then you have to be finding free for 2 years to be considered low risk again. So the high risk means they have to audit more of those federal dollars than the low risk. But really that's the difference. How'd I do?
Excellent
All
job.
right.
Just like a speeding ticket, huh?
Just
Takes 2 years to leave.
right. Yes, this is a great analogy. I am very pleased that Alina noted that last year we did have some management letter comments. We had 5. 3 of them had been from the prior year, and we cleared all of those. and for the FY24 audit. So I am very proud of that, and I think you should all be very proud of your team as well.
Thank you.
Alita, don't we usually get a summary from you, a one-page summary with an overview or a synopsis of what you are seeing, what you uncovered, if anything, and your recommendations?
Yes, but the management letter comments that we had last year are no longer issues this year. And the PowerPoint that I've done in the past included some of the numbers that Sarah so nicely pointed out in this PowerPoint.
So we
It's the
can,
management letter you're thinking of.
yeah, is it?
Yeah.
Yes, so the management letter comments we had in the past were not issues for fiscal year '24.
Okay, why is that?
Because Sarah's department did a lot of, Sarah particularly spent a lot of time, some were involved around policies and procedures that have to be updated or corrected or fixed, dealing with some IT and general control issues and things like that. And that all has been resolved for fiscal year '24.
Okay. Is there anything that says that?
No, we actually don't have to report if something is resolved. The way that it works is
Gold
that
star.
the comment would be repeated that would not be resolved.
Okay.
I
Wasn't
think
there
Sarah wants a letter with a gold star. Just like good
So
job.
Donna did an
Should I
excellent
get-
job resolving all the comments.
Thank you.
Chad, question?
There was like 4 or 5 of them last year.
Yeah, it was. That's a big deal.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
pretty
that's
awesome that
great.
that all got cleaned up.
Thank you.
So you've done this 3 times? You've been involved 3 years in a row with this audit?
You know,
Since 2016, 8 years.
Okay. And would you say that that's standard to have the same auditing team audit the same records for 8 years?
Yes, that's not out of the ordinary. It hasn't been the same audit team though. So the senior manager has now been involved second 2 years. We had another manager before that. We had change in supervisor and change in staff. The senior manager that was here and the 2 senior accountants, the 2 senior accountants been involved for, I think, well, they came with a team, so they were here for the last 2 years. But the manager who was here before that had his team, so the full audit team was not the same for 8 years. It's just that I've been, the partner, now the CBIS is shareholder for CBCPAs and managing director of CBIS, but I just been, I guess, the person in charge of the audit for 8 years. Might be even less because there was another partner involved the first year or 2. So it has not been the same
Okay.
full audit.
Yeah, I don't remember you in the first audits where I was present, but I remember you in the later ones.
Okay, then you
But it's
remember
been a long time.
Scott McIntyre,
I-
the partner
yeah.
that used to be involved
I
in this
think I
audit.
see you more than my mother.
Tim, that's terrible. I'm the only one who should be able to say that.
I want to send them on a card.
Okay, I just thought that was, it kind of runs in the face of auditing if you have the same
It's-
auditors
it's
looking at
a
the same books year after year after year after year, right?
A little different for government than a commercial entity because in the governmental world, there is not as much competition when it comes to auditing firms that have expertise in auditing governmental entities. So where I know, SOX or whatever they follow for their internal control structure, sometimes they recommend that the audit committee would have an audit rotation every 5 years or so. That has not been the case in governmental world because in a way, the very first year that you have new auditor, it's a much longer year for you with the new audit team
Yeah.
firm that because of the specialty limitation that it takes to basically get to know you, and it just becomes counterproductive in that year. And while it seems like a great idea, it's just GFOA puts out something like that about the limitation of the governmental world, and
Okay.
that firms that specialize in government authorities, which makes it a little counterproductive at some points. But yeah, I mean, it's something we want to do for the accomplished, but that's just something GFOA put out several years ago.
And just to pull on that theme a little bit, while Elena's face has been constant, the field staff underneath her have changed. And in the middle of their engagement, we put it out to bid at least once. And the complexity of the city's operation with TIF, there's a limited pool of firms that can bid on that work. So.
Anyone have any other questions for Alina? Or Sarah?
Thanks for your
Thank you.
enthusiasm,
Appreciate
Sarah.
it.
Oh, you're welcome.
No,
That
you
comes
might-
naturally.
You might lose Sarah to the classroom.
I know.
Thank you, Alina. Drive safe.
Thanks, Alina. We'll move on to item number 6, which is consider the adoption of revised ethics policy. Sarah, you're up again.
I am, and we are on this topic one more time?
One more time.
Question mark.
We'll see.
So Dom and I looked at this together. He did a lot of the cutting, but we think we've come back with a policy that removes definitions that already exist in other authoritative documents, so it doesn't have as much duplication. We've referenced existing policies that the city already has specifically for staff, and we've reiterated the council's existing authority to handle non-staff violations as they see fit. Open to any questions, suggestions?
And can you just remind me again, I know Chip answered it, but on an email, but what is the consequence if we don't adopt this?
So the requirement to have a policy around the investigation and enforcement of municipal code of ethics violations is part of the state statute that was adopted at the end of last summer. Are there consequences if we don't adopt this? There are none written in statute, just like there are no consequences for individuals who refuse to take the training, other than that would likely be noted if in an investigation, if one were to be initiated against that individual. So there are currently no repercussions to not adopting a policy in statute, but it is specifically called out in that language that we have to have an ordinance, policy, or rule. We thought ordinance was a little heavy-handed though.
This goes to Representative Luno's comments earlier too, that the state passes mandates with no real enforcement capabilities.
Make a motion to adopt the revised ethics policy and move that the vote be taken by word.
Do we have a motion? Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Chad. So we have a motion, now we'll move to discussion.
Now only one question, because I never anticipated this to be an issue. But the last, the E and F, E obviously fall to you to handle those type of ethical situations, and F would fall to us, but what about you, Dom, specifically?
You'd handle that.
We would, okay, I just wasn't sure where they fall.
Yeah.
Not that, again, not that I ever expect anything.
Which is handled in accordance with the personnel policies.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I guess that kind of bridges to the, does this do anything different than what we're doing now?
No, and if I might elaborate on that, I think you have far greater risks in not adopting this. We regularly have to fill out paperwork that says that we have checked this box and that box and that we're in compliance with all known regs and yada, 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 right? This policy doesn't say anything. It says we're gonna do our jobs, right? If something comes up, the manager will deal with it, and if something comes up to the council will deal with it. It doesn't limit your discretion in any way. This policy just says, yeah, we'll deal with it. All the other work has already been foisted upon us by the legislature.
So can you read the definition of municipal officer again?
There's no definitions in this. You mean in the,
I wanna know what a municipal officer means.
in the law?
I don't know. Am I a municipal officer?
Yeah, 100%. Or everybody in the room's a municipal officer.
Fire chief,
Yeah,
fire, police,
Yeah.
fire, sheriff.
no,
No.
Cemetery commissioner.
yeah. If we had them.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Motion calls, there's no other discussion, right? Make sure everyone's good.
Do you want do you have the definition? Do you want the definition still?
Go ahead.
All right. Municipal officer means A, any member of a legislative body of a municipality. B, any member of a quasi-judicial body of a municipality. Or C, any individual who holds the position of or exercises the function of any of the following: advisory budget committee member, auditor, building inspector, cemetery commissioner, chief administrative officer, clerk, collector of delinquent taxes, department heads, first constable, lister or assessor, mayor, moderator, planning commission member, road commissioner, town or city manager, treasurer, village or town trustee, trustee of public funds, or water commissioner.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we take a vote? We're gonna start with, we have to start with Ward 1.
Yeah. Nay.
Ward 2.
Oh,
Put her on the spot. Linda.
that's me. I guess, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I guess I'm wondering why, well, Tim, what's your reason for no?
Said it all last meeting. You can abstain, I think, if you
Yeah, I
wanted to,
was
if you
thinking
felt
the same
that you were put in the middle of some situation. We started it last
I was here last meeting.
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the same reasons that I gave last meeting. I don't need somebody from Montpelier telling me that I have to prove a positive. You know, if there's something that I'm doing wrong, or something that someone perceives that I'm doing wrong, A, they can contact me. B, they can contact the mayor. C, they can not vote for me in 3 years. So I don't need to sign something or to approve something that says I'm gonna be honest, or I'm not gonna do something that's detrimental to my duties as counselor on the Albans City Council. And just because some progressive body in Montpelier says that I should do it, doesn't mean I have to do it. I take the same oath, the same kind of stuff as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need someone to tell me that I'm gonna do something ethically or unethically. So, Ward 1's name.
Okay. Coming to Ward 2.
I'm gonna abstain.
Abstain. Ward 3.
Yay.
Yay. Ward 4.
Yeah.
Yay for children. Okay. Ward 5. Yay. And as mayor, I would say nay. So the vote, the ethics policy passes. And we will move on. Thank you all for that discussion. We're going to move on to short-term debt for 54 North Main Street.
All right, thank you very much. The next thing up is the request for a one-year extension on the short-term note that we have outstanding that was used to purchase 54 and 58 North Main Street in 2022. This is part of our redevelopment plan, an ongoing project at that location, and we anticipate this note being held until such time as the property sells. The bank came back this morning and said that the interest rate would be 2.15% for the next 12 months. I am asking for the council's authorization to renew this for a term of 12 months.
Motion to renew?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions for Sarah to renew the loan? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all.
Now we're gonna go move to item number 8, which is considered adoption of TA 60 annual financial plan.
And the last thing from me this evening is the adoption of the annual financial plan for town highways. So we are required to spend at least $300 per mile of class 1, 2, and 3 town highways through municipal taxes. We blow that out of the water every year, and this is the state form that shows that we actually do that. So one of the things Mr. Luna was talking about was the mileage figures. So the class 1, 2, and 3 mileage figures come straight from the certification of road mileage that Chip brought to you last month or the month before, multiplied out by how much the state is currently paying out per mile to get an estimate of what we'll receive next year. This is then offset by other revenue sources in the budget. We break up our expenditures between winter, non-winter, and major capital and construction projects, and then we plug whatever is needed as local tax funds, which is about $1.5 million. I am happy to answer any questions about this. Otherwise, I would look for your approval, and I'll pass it around for signature.
I'll make a motion to adopt TA 60 annual financial plan.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other questions for Sarah or Marty?
Where are you gonna do most of the paving this year?
Smith Street.
That's a good question. Looking at class 2 grants, if we do Congress and the rest of Upper Weldon, that'll cost us $150,000. So, do we wait and try to get a class 2 grant next year to do it? Or do we spend our money to do it now? And we've got a list of other streets I can circulate via email.
And the state's North Main, right?
What's
The
that?
state is North Main, or are we also North Main? There's a couple of massive potholes up in North Main.
Yeah, that's class 1 roads, that's all state.
And the Marty, in the budget, you have the annual paving of Rubley Street, right?
Yes, absolutely. And curbs.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the financial plan, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for everything this evening.
You're welcome. I appreciate you.
You have that coming around?
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute, Sarah, it's only 10 of 7, you have until 7:40.
Well, I'd be happy to talk some more about fund accounting.
Yeah, could you go back over the audit, please?
I would. Don't tempt me. Chip, would you like the hot seat back?
Oh, sure.
All right, we're moving on to number 9, which is the second reading of the traffic ordinance update. Chip, come on up and join us.
Thank you very much. This is a set of amendments that's adding some clarity to some, and updating some sections of Title 17, which includes all the traffic rules. If you look at what's in your packet, Section 1 clears up an issue where we were still referencing the old name of that bottom portion of what used to be Ferris Street, but is now School Street. Talking about the stop sign on School Street at South Main. Section 2, we are updating all of our rules about traffic control signals with what is the latest in state statute, with just a couple little tweaks to suit the city context. But our traffic signal rules were actually quite old and still references signals that use the words stop and go rather than just a red light or a green light. Section 3, adding the traffic light location at Federal Street in Lower Newman, which will be activated later this year. Section 4, basically saying that there are 2 places in the city where even when there's a steady red signal, but it's not a red arrow, you still can't turn right, and that's from Lake Street onto South Main and from Fairfield onto South Main. And then Section 5 removes a reference to not being able to take a left turn onto Center Street from Main Street. That's a rule we haven't been enforcing for quite some time. And then not taking a left from Main onto Hoyt, which is unnecessary because Hoyt is one way anyway. And there are already signs that say you shouldn't be going down Hoyt from Main Street. So those are the updates.
So why does it only list the left turn?
A long time ago, the city found cause to put a couple places where you couldn't take a left turn onto Main, probably because they didn't want you backing up traffic behind you as you waited to take that left. But I haven't found that to be a major issue at the top of Center Street. There's plenty of times that traffic takes a left onto Center and it doesn't back things up on Main very much.
Isn't it the same on Kingman? Is that Kingman too?
Kingman's where you're not supposed to turn left from Kingman onto Main.
Right.
And that's a rule that we've had for a while, and we haven't changed it. We can look into it, but
It's a significant blind spot coming off the top of that.
that might be the reason why.
You're pretty close to the lights.
Motion that we accept as presented the amendments to Title 17 of the city ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions for Chip?
Still think we should do the traffic circle in Lower Newton, but
We're getting off subject a little bit.
involves the lights.
Any other comments? Hearing none. Do we have a motion and a second? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Chip, thank you.
Can I make one
There you go.
comment? It's a good one. I took a picture a number of years ago. I saw Ferris Street on Main Street signs still there when Kate and I would walk down between BFA before the connector. So I thought I had to be the one as the Ward 5 rep and really on Ferris Street to make the motion on that, because I feel like it's a historic moment, taking that final cut that shut off Ferris Street from Main Street, even though it was already cut off. So,
You will eventually. You will, but not right yet.
Chip, you're up with, Kate, you're here, come on up, introduce yourself if you
Is
would.
there someone joining you, Kate, or?
No.
No? Okay. Let's see.
You're just moral support.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Kate. So, Chip, I'll turn it over to you and give an overview of what we're discussing.
The Vermont Community Development Program is the state entity that administers HUD block grant funds. And in order to access those funds, you need to go through the municipality. And so many times, normally a local nonprofit has come through the city to seek VCDP funds to support projects. And part of the process is that we need to come before the city council to get your approval to put in that grant application and assign me and Dom the certain roles with that grant application. First, we do a public hearing, and then the council considers that resolution for that approval. So I'd like to introduce Kate Lewin, who is trying to set up Hope Road Recovery Residence for Women. Has a property in mind where they could use some VCDP funds for acquisition and maybe some other purposes. Take it away, Kate.
Let's just say who I am. Okay. I'm Kate Lewin. I'm not a resident of Albans City. I live in Fairfield, Vermont. And I started Hope Road Recovery, a nonprofit to support women in recovery. So we do not have a recovery house for women at all in Franklin or Grand Isle County. It's been a designated site for a recovery residence for women since 2017 based on a needs assessment. And so we're long overdue to have one in this county. And this funding, recovery housing program funding through the state of Vermont is specific for CDBG funds and its priority funding because of the need for this type of housing in Vermont in general. And so I'm going for lots of other options, but this specifically is for brick and mortar, which is what's essential to start a recovery house. So
Is this something different than back in time?
Yes.
What we were talking
It's a
about
domestic.
times ago? Okay.
Yes, it's completely different. Yep. Do you want me to elaborate on that? Or?
Sure.
So shelter, that's what you were describing, is for more of seeking safety. So aside from that, this is solely for accountability of keeping people sober and safe. So you have to stay sober in the recovery residence and you don't have to be fleeing.
Okay. And do you have any prospective sites that
Yeah.
you're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what they are?
Yeah, it's 296 South Main Street, Dr. Gunther's old house. We're next to Elaine Gunther.
Do we have a sober house for men already?
Yes, we have we've had one for at least 7 years. And we have,
Red Top.
yeah, it's on Lake Street. And then we have, through Restorative Justice, we have housing for men as well, and no housing for women.
Kate, can you, I know we've spoken about this, can you give a quick overview of what your facility would look like, what expectations, what type of supervision? I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. So it will be a level 3 certified recovery residence, which actually there are none in the state of Vermont. So it was a higher, well, there's one, it's 2.5. So this is a higher level supervision. There's on-site staff. It would have 5 women who are going to be residents of the house, and they're staffed. So there's a person that lives there that will be there for 24/7, aside from staff that fill in when they're not there. And the program can range from 6 months to 2 years.
And those residents would come from where?
Franklin County.
Not Grand Isle, preferably Franklin.
Priority is Franklin County, but we're also not gonna have a bed empty.
So once again, sorry, Eric. So once again, St. Albans is providing something for all the other towns in Franklin County, like you brought up a couple of meetings ago, and we're getting no funds, and we're getting no consideration from those other towns that we're assisting.
I think a good question maybe is how many beds are we looking at? I'm sorry if I missed that. And what's
5.
what's the demand currently?
Oh, the demand for this county
Yeah.
or statewide?
It's for our county.
I mean, I can't speak, I don't have like a needs assessment specifically for this county, but I will say that this county, being that there is no housing for women now, and that we have the highest rate of individuals who go to treatment who are homeless, I could definitely fill 4 times the amount of beds that we would be getting, so the need is there. To the point of being locally in St. Albans City, there are some requirements to be in, well, not requirements, but recommendations to be in close distance to BART clinics, which is something that's in this specific city. So that came before.
Kate, could we also, what about people who are in recovery? So say someone who lives on, I don't know, Smith Street, and they need to go into recovery, but they are from this community and their recovery is right down the street from where they would buy their drugs and use their drugs. How is that, are the recommendations around that? Because I know that I've talked to some folks in recovery who've like, I just have to get out of the community for a bit because it's really hard when you're still in it.
Can I just add to that too? The whole Grove would not be the first stop for.
Correct.
Right, it would be, can you explain the?
Yep, so you would have to have typically it's 30 days, and then of sobriety or treatment, so a higher level care, and then you would move in. So you would be medically stabilized at unfortunately we don't have any treatment centers, but down south or out of state, which is what most people have to do. And then you would come to this housing, so you're already at a more stable state, and I would say that eventually people have to go back to where they live, and so this would actually be that support that people don't have, because people tend to have to go back to the houses that could potentially be less safe, so this gives them, individuals a bridge before, to build skills. Right now, there is no stop. And women, I know countless women, who have either died because they didn't have this option, or who have had to move to Maine, Maine, New Hampshire. So people that could be working, contributing to society in this area are moving away. Jobs waiting for them to come back to, but they have to go live somewhere else for a year or 2. So we're losing people that could be helping us out too.
When last time we spoke, or one of the times we spoke, you said you were going to reach out to the town too, because I shared with you the concern that it always seems to be the city, and there's a lot of other communities that also have the same struggle. Did you have a successful meeting with the town? Because the property is it's right on the line.
We talked about that. With this funding specifically, it actually it makes more work essentially. Not that there can't be collaboration going forward, but when you go for this specific you may be able to speak better to this than I can, but the HUD funding, then you have to have 2 public hearings, then you have, so there's a lot more paperwork for everybody. And
For the purposes of this grant, since the property is in the city, we only have to hold a hearing in the city. It doesn't preclude Kate from also talking to the town about any support if it's ever needed.
or any other town
Yeah.
in Franklin County, because I
Yeah.
would love everybody to contribute.
The
Well,
city,
so would we.
yeah, I mean, the city's in a situation where a lot of people from around the county and elsewhere come here for many low barrier, no consequence services that in many ways have ended up conceding and abiding the presence of community substance use disorder in the city. That's the problem we're in. What we actually need more of are things that address the substance use disorder head on and do have consequences. And the only thing that would bring more consequence to this is if you were locked in order there by a court, which I'm not quite sure that this kind of residence would do, but this is pretty close to more of what the city actually needs to see. It's like, you can't get into this, wherever you're from, unless there are gonna be consequences to what happens next with your life once you're in this place.
And I would say expectations too, of, like, we're gonna have a whole curriculum aside from recovery support, that will actually support people in career development. We have a whole curriculum for that, so.
You can talk to us about accountability, Marie's favorite word.
Yes. Well, yeah, so, I mean, there will be drug testing, there's house guidelines, there's a whole expectation admission agreement, you know, and I think maybe to that, you know, yes, we have to, keep, the idea is that you have to keep the house safe for everybody, right? But we also need to keep the community safe, so we would have a safety plan, for residents, trying to work with local support around, because we don't have what you were talking to earlier, we don't have a public immigration bed anymore. But you could work with local organizations on how to kind of stabilize people if they need to go somewhere. So again, you're still building in more support for people who are being less accountable to where they are by moving them up to places where they're gonna have to be even more accountable. So it's creating a system.
So,
Yeah.
what you're asking from the city is just to allow you to go get funding.
Yep.
Above and beyond that, what burden does the taxpayer have?
It would be seen as the city council's support for the project in general, which would take a property and make it tax exempt. It's a house. There's some staff time associated with helping to administer the grant, but we build that into our budget.
And actually, you can start going to the pre-awards, I was
Yeah,
told.
yeah, we do build some of our costs to the project or a council's match. Yeah,
Yeah.
we do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I know you were applying for a nonprofit. Did you get your nonprofit?
Yeah, I've had that for a year. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I have all that.
Chip, are all of the shelters and treatment facilities that we have in the city, are they all tax exempt? Like, I mean, we have several,
I
like
think so.
the Bart
Yeah.
Clinic, Lori's House, Back in Time, Tim's House, all those places.
Typically, if they're
tax
owned
exempt.
by a nonprofit and used for that nonprofit's purpose, then they would be tax exempt. So yeah, I think, I would say, if I had to answer it quickly, I'd say, yeah, they're all tax exempt.
No, Spectrum wouldn't be, right?
Oh, it's gotta be
Because
a
Spectrum
shelter.
rents their
Right,
space.
rent
Spectrum
space.
rents their space, and it's owned by a private landlord, so we still tax that space. Yeah, good catch. But if it's owned by the nonprofit and it's operated for the nonprofit's purpose, then it's tax exempt.
And the state doesn't have a function for saying, hey, we're taking these tax exempts and then we're losing the property tax on, what can you guys give us, like more grants or?
Is Joe still here?
Yeah. Well, but, yeah, I mean, there's a whole, so aside from property tax, there's funds right now that we're losing access to by not having established recovery residents, aside from, through different acts, through recovery residence funding and through opioid settlement funds, which are settlement funds, which are not grant, which are a lot easier to overall administer, but because we're not in queue for that now, we aren't thought of as an option. So we're potentially losing out on funding from other sources.
Chip, can you elaborate? This is a new compartmentalized funding for CDBG. This wasn't there in the past. Can you-
Specifically, recovery house?
Yep, Brick House
Program?
programming, and it was
Yeah.
supported by the Support Act and federal government in 2020.
And I think it is HUD funds, it's being administered through the VCD program, just like all the other HUD funds, so we have to follow all the same processes.
What's the expected duration that people stay? There's only 5 beds.
Yeah, 6 months to 2 years.
Yeah, you said that's right.
That's okay.
What's our risk, Chip? What would the risk be for the city? Other than, I mean, it's not a risk, but we're losing tax.
It's a we do it as a reimbursement only grant, so, I mean, Kate would incur costs, bring the information to us as an invoice, everything would look like it checks out, then we make our request from the state pays us money, then we pay Kate. Now, we're keeping an eye on things to make sure that if VCDP monitoring ever occurs, that they don't find that there's a huge hiccup or fraud or something that would make them claw the money back. But we actually aren't really taking on any liabilities until we actually take that VCDP money and reimburse Kate. And we've never had an issue with any of these programs. The VCDP program, those staff, they work pretty closely with us on making sure that they don't want any of their projects that they choose to fund to fail either.
This process,
So there's not much risk for the city at all.
if this were to be approved, the process would be the same as what Albans Blossoms was. We did the exact same thing
Yeah.
for Ms. Garcelle to buy the building and renovate Albans Blossoms down on Lake Street.
Is that the preschool or
Yeah,
daycare or
preschool.
whatever?
The state is also, the state and the city will also be protected by a mortgage that's taken out over the property. So there will be the city will hold a mortgage on the property if this goes through that says that Oak Grove will abide by all of the requirements of the grant agreement and all the other HUD requirements and stand in the city's shoes and sort of take on those risks.
I'm gonna move, anyone have any other comments on the council?
Well, maybe I'll just wait.
So we'll move to the audience. Anyone in the audience would like to make a comment on this?
I think the only other thing I'd highlight is that Kate is pursuing to be certified by VTER, which is the Vermont Alliance for Recovery Residences, based off the national model NAR. And those certified recovery residences implement best practices and have technical support, some backing to keep the houses running professionally. So I just want to highlight that too, because there are some in the state of Vermont that, when we hear the term sober house and halfway house, that kind of scares me when I hear that nowadays, because it might just be somebody excited about being in treatment, wanting to open up their house, and a lot of not so great things can happen that way, versus the ones that are professionally certified. I've been on that board of directors now for, I think, almost 8 years. So with this house, she would be, first off, the highest level. When we look at a level 3 in the state of Vermont, right now there's 4 different organizations that operate 14 different residences across the state. But hers would be, again, the first one with the highest level. And they, like Kate said, a person who is not following the rules and not in, I don't like the word compliance with recovery, but struggling in their recovery would be referred to a higher level of care. They wouldn't be able to stay there. So there's a lot of programs that are sometimes not quite as strict, and we see that out in the streets. But when it comes to the certified recovery residences, there's a plan in place for that exact reason, so there isn't pushback. And so far, the other residences that are certified have had very good progress. And then there's also a big cost benefits for a person who is in a recovery residence versus out on the streets, hitting the emergency department on the regular, committing crimes, going to court. So there's a calculator, and I won't keep on going, but there is a calculator on our VTAR site that explains what the cost benefit analysis is for a person going to a recovery residences versus going through the rotating door of a system that doesn't catch them. So this is a critical piece in the continuum of care for somebody in recovery.
No, sorry, what's your name?
Oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Melinda White, resident of St. Albans Town and work in the city.
We all hold that against you.
Anyone else in the audience? Any comments? So basically, this item on the agenda was just to get an overview. It's considered a public hearing for the purpose. It's required as part of the grant. So you have checked that box if we move forward, right?
Correct.
So now we would move, no decision is needed on that, but now we move to item 12, which would consider approval of resolution for Hope Grove.
I move to approve the resolution for Hope Grove.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any comments or
I'll make a comment.
questions?
You go
There you
first.
go. For all the things that, I'm sorry, Kate brings, I'm in favor of it. However, I'm not in favor of it for all the things that we've talked about over the last couple meetings. But the things that she brings outweighs those to me. But I still think that we need to have further discussions on more support from other communities for the things that the city does.
Here, here. That was, I'm gonna just piggyback on that. It's hard, in my role as a council person, to hear people say in the recovery community, in the community partners, that the city's not doing enough. It's very hard to hear when I think in my head and list all the things that we do as a city. And when community partners criticize us for not doing enough, I disagree. And I'm actually tired of hearing it. We have done so much, and we could list them all, and we're doing our part. We need other communities to step up. Fairfield, Georgia, Swanton, Fairfield, Richford, Enosburg, St. Albans Town. Even though we have all of the services here, it doesn't mean that we have to have all. Burden isn't a kind word. Give me a better word, Melinda.
Buy-in.
Yeah.
Participation.
Because,
Cost. Commitment.
right. And when we have all of those services here, it does weigh on our AmCare, our fire, our rescue, our police. So that is something that we need to think about. And very quickly, what will the day look like for, I know there'll be a curfew.
Oh,
And what will the days look like for women at your recovery house, which I'm fully in favor of, and I've talked to and I feel very confident. What will the days look like?
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of structure. And I say a lot of structure in comparison to other residences that I'm aware of. Expected time, we're actually gonna do meals together. We're gonna have kind of a community component to that. And there's gonna be actual coursework that the women are gonna be in. That's a curriculum, 60 hours. It was actually started in a correctional facility here in the state of Vermont. I'm co-partnering with programming, it's called Step Out Vermont, but they'll be in classes with homework, expected homework, job searches, volunteering. So they're available to the community too, not just the community's available to them. Curfews, then they're gonna have to be doing recovery, other treatments, so they're not gonna have downtime. We don't want them to.
That's great. And will this have to be like, what happens if things go, like, if you're in charge?
Yeah.
Great. What if you leave, someone else comes in and like, things aren't as they were? Like, how does that impact the neighborhood, and like, what happens if things
The
go
nuisance
south?
property ordinance.
Okay,
The nuisance property ordinance will apply to this property just like any other.
Yeah.
okay. And and
It's a single family residence, but it's a public, zoning wise, it's a public building.
Yeah.
and that's not a heavy residential area, or is it?
We've got the vet and the gas station and
Okay.
Econo Lodge is somewhere.
There's the West View
Yeah.
or Harbor View. whatever
And
it's
do the
called.
folks that live around, like, have a say, or get, like, to know about
Oh,
what's
yeah.
gonna
Well,
happen?
it might need a zoning permit, so they would get a
Okay.
notice of that.
And I'm in support of, whatever I need to do for that area, whether that be with, meet with people. I will say I spoke with my realtor, and the Gunthers are in full support now, finally. They've needed to just double check, rightfully so on their part. And so they're in complete support, and they're fine with me sharing that tonight. So we're gonna move forward with environmental reviews. soon, which is a part of the process as well. So they are excited to be able to support something in the community that they've provided a lot of support to in a different way.
Thanks, Kate.
Yeah.
One last question, Kate, you're gonna run the operation,
Yes.
so you will leave current employment?
In some capacity, yes. Yeah. I'm a nurse. I'll be transparent. I'm a nurse, so I need to keep my nursing license, but I will not be doing what I've been doing full time. And just a little bit of background about me. I've been a nurse, but I've also been in management. I've managed hospitals and acute care units, and I managed a meat leaf farm a long time ago. So I do have a good amount of history dealing with this, and I'm a person in recovery too. I've been in recovery since 2015. So I know it's what I needed when I wanted to come back here and be a nurse, but I didn't have that option at first. So I want more people to have this option.
Okay, before we take a vote, I just want to say ditto to what Trudy said. Get that word out to surrounding communities that we cannot.
Throwing our fundraiser, we're going to have our fundraiser out, so I'm happy to send it to any town in the area or organization.
So we have a motion and second to approve the resolution that was in your packet. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No opposition, motion passes. Kate,
One
thank
step
you.
closer,
I
Kate.
appreciate it.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice job.
All right, we're moving on to item number 13, which is annual certificate of road standards. Chip Sawyer will be presenting.
Back in, I think it was June of 2019, when the state standards were updated slightly, the city adopted them. And since they haven't changed since, we are still required to do an annual certification. That we did adopt them back in 2019, so that's what I bring before you now. Basically says that we adopted them, what was March? No? Yep. We're sort of re-adopting them every year is what we do. We adopted the standards back on June 5th, 2019. It's kind of the same thing that Sarah just presented for the annual highway financial plan. This is another annual highway thing we need to certify.
Motion to approve annual certification of road standards.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any questions for Chip? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to, Chip, you're still with us. Consider approval of signage grant for thirsty thrifters.
I'm joined by Chelsea Howard, who opened Thirsty Thrifters in a storefront downtown right across the streets.
Chelsea, thank you for joining and thank you for choosing St. Albans.
And this is another case where I'm recommending that we we contribute towards the signage to make sure that there's ample and good-looking signage at the site, which obviously benefits the building and the surrounding uses downtown. We have an estimate from JD Design for a wall sign, which whimsically uses a bed spring as the background. It will be preserved so that it doesn't rust. And then also a projecting sign so that pedestrians on the sidewalk will also be able to see the business without having to look up on the wall. So when you take the estimate and you apply a 5% contingency, I'm recommending a 50-50 grant where our portion does not exceed $1,325.50.
And that covers both sides.
Right.
And we have no minimal duration of time the business has to stick around. I was just thinking because one salon just moved out with their signs, and I know they all moved in a little while ago.
Who moved out?
Salon Elixir, they moved out to the town, and took their signs and looking at that was a 50-50 facade grant.
That's a good point. Signage grants typically aren't as much as when we participate more vigorously in things like fitting up the space where we do put more into the agreement, but whereas Salon Elixir did exist for a while, I had missed the fact that they took the signs. That's something
'Cause
something
They're
staff can look into.
could they be repurposed?
Well, it's
Yeah,
like
that's the thing, it's really
so-
gonna be hard to repurpose them, right?
I was thinking more along the lines of like, yeah, they're here for 5 years, great, they're signs, they're not here for 5 years, well, you guys have to pay back a certain percent of the money that were put towards that, especially with the facade grants. I know this is a small amount, I completely agree with this, I just was thinking long term, encouraging businesses to stick around too, also. I mean, that was just a move because of the landlord concern, but all these little things add up.
We could explore that as part of the agreement, something like that. We're not really, we don't have a great hand if we're trying to, talking small claims,
Yeah.
but,
No, I agree.
yeah.
This really isn't about the sign, it's about the bigger
I think it's a bigger picture.
projects.
Yeah. I love these things.
There's
Marty, I
days
couldn't
that-
help but think if we repossess these signs, they'll be in your city hall clean out every
You're right, actually, Eric, we would prefer the business takes the signs.
Cheaper to take down, yeah.
We don't need them in our basement.
You plan on sticking around a bit?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Chelsea, why don't we give you a minute to talk about your business, how's it going, and,
It's going good. The past couple months have been very slow, I will say. But December, everyone was coming in and it was really great. The tractor parade really pulled in people. I stayed open during it and people came in to like be warmed, check it out, they didn't know. But people are starting to walk downtown and realize I'm there. Obviously the signage would be great because they look up and it's like, oh, it's Bucket, what's this? Oh, I don't know. You know, it says open, do I want to go in, you know. But other than that, word of mouth has been awesome. And people have been really great telling it around.
Chelsea's also worked and been involved in businesses downtown for a decade, 12 years.
Over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PJ hasn't talked about shortening up his sign at all? His
They
banner?
are, he's getting,
Is he?
he's moving his sign, or he's
Oh.
getting a new sign. So that will be helpful too.
Yeah.
when you say sign, awning?
Awning, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't asked about the awning, but I
That's
know
all
he's
right.
getting a new sign at least, and then we'll be.
Because that says Paul Poquet, that's
Yeah.
right in front of it, so, yeah.
And there is another vintage shop opening.
Mhm.
Can you compare and contrast the difference?
So she's, the Spotlight Vintage,
Yeah.
yeah, so she's mostly vintage clothing as far as I know. And I,
And caution.
okay, and costumes. And I'm mostly like a thrift shop, so, I mean, I did the back space, I did just put in some clothes, but it's like secondhand clothing, and it's furniture, house decor, everything, anything and everything. And it's fair priced, I'm not like here to gouge anyone, I just want people to come in and keep coming back. And I want it to be affordable for everyone.
Thank you. I think it's curated very nicely. Kate, use time.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
I'll make
any
a
other
comment.
questions or comments?
Make a motion to approve signage grant for Thirsty Grifters.
Motion by Trudy, seconded by Tim.
Too slow for you?
No other questions, so all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none. You have a new sign, Chelsea?
Good luck, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for
Thanks for-
opening up.
Yeah.
We have an appointment of Don Corello, is that proper?
Carrillo.
Corello,
Yeah.
who had met before Marie, Eric, and myself for the Historic Preservation Commission interview. And we had a good interview, and I'll turn it over to Eric.
Yeah, we met with him last week. He works for the dispatch, train dispatch center. Has a strong passion for history and architecture. He knows a lot about architecture, actually. He can specifically name homes around the city that stand out for their unique architecture, which was it was fascinating to actually have that kind of background on. He doesn't have any training or education specific to history or architecture, but I think his knowledge and the rest of the fact that the rest of the other 4 members have strengths in those areas, I think he'd be a good fit. Make a motion in a moment, but let you guys ask questions for anything that we might have.
Any further discussion?
I have a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
So I motion that we appoint Don Carrillo to the Historic Preservation Commission for the vacant term ending in May 31st of 2027.
Second.
So close out that term.
Motion approved motion made by Eric, second by Trudy. Any further discussion? Council, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Record reflect that Mr. Carrillo is now on the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you.
We're gonna move on to item number 16, which is approval of wastewater allocation for 468 Swanton Road, which I was gonna ask. My first question is, what building is that? Does anyone know? Marty, you know?
Is that the?
468 Swanton Road?
Is that the,
Is that where that coffee shop's going?
Champlain
No.
Commons, is it? Champlain Commons?
is that?
Yeah, that's down by, isn't that down by the drive-in or?
Across from Warren.
468
Yeah.
is next to Champlain Commons,
Yeah,
across
yeah.
from the RV
So that's
dealership.
it used to be a trailer there that was on a well and a septic. They tore the trailer down and they're building a small office building there
Yes, that's right.
and hooking onto our water.
Yeah.
And that's fine with you?
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
got it.
We've got a water line that runs right by them and they're gonna hook into the force main sewer there as well.
How far out do we go on that line? Like how, where's our
There,
customer?
it ends there. I think Progressive Auto
Oh,
is
okay.
on the sewer.
Gotcha.
And then the water line runs on the other side of the road, all the way up to the golf course.
I'll make a motion to approve the water allocation for 468 Swanton Road.
I'll second.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the allocation, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. 17, were we gonna do that next meeting, or we wanna knock that off?
I'm
We're
prepared
gonna
to make a motion.
You are? We're ready.
I make a motion to appoint Tim Hawkins as council president.
Second.
I asked first.
Wait, you didn't even have to do that, too.
Any discussion? Let's discuss it.
Can you leave the room for a minute? Any questions about the nomination for Mr. Hawkins to be council president?
What term would this be?
This would be 2,
Two? Okay.
taking over for Chad Spooner. Might have had one
There you
before.
go.
Yeah.
Go for it. Thanks,
So
Tim.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Mr. Hawkins is council president. Thank you, Tim.
Congratulations.
All right, we're moving on to mayor's report. Couple quick things. Congrats to staff and Don and everyone for passing the budget and getting the stormwater project. I think we were
That's great.
a little concerned about that, but I thank the voters for, both were probably 3-1 votes.
Yeah,
So
excellent.
That's
I
great.
thought it was excellent, that it shows support for what we're doing, I believe. Question on appraisal, when will we, what's a appraisal timeline, what are we looking at?
Sure.
The first couple weeks of April, we're gonna start sending out the, we're gonna hold the informal hearings where we send out the draft, new reappraisal values to homeowners, along with some information on what happened to the rest of the city. You'll be able to compare your new appraisal versus other homes, and you'll be able to come in and speak to the reappraisal team if you have any questions or if you have issues with your number. We'll do the same thing with commercial properties, probably in May. And then after that, we will then send out the final reappraisals to everyone, sort of repeating the process, except this time it's the real deal. And this is the point at which, if you still have an issue, you would follow the official grievance process. Just like, and every year when we send the notice out to everyone whose values changed, it's just that this time everyone's values changed. The reappraisal team stays with us through the whole process, and they will defend their work right up to the BCA and the state. But we typically, what we try to do is have most of people's critical issues dealt with during that informal process in April and May. so that they don't grieve later on. Trying to help them understand everything going on.
Were they able to get into every residence, or there's still a bunch of?
Well, probably not. We weren't expecting that any firm would be able to get into every residence, but I can get the numbers. I know they've been working hard at it, and they increased their field staff to do it.
Nobody's come to my house.
I was gonna say the
Yeah,
same
no one's
thing,
coming
right?
by either.
We scheduled it, we had somebody in.
Yeah.
They came to ours.
They've been using the existing data we have, and they've been doing exterior visits.
They're welcome to come to my house.
I think you have to schedule it, you had to schedule it online, right? For them to
Yeah,
come.
when the mailings first went out.
But now it's too late now.
I don't know if it's too late. I can check on that.
They did a good job.
If you could check and just send that to the council, because I'm on the same boat. I mean, I think I got noticed, and it just goes by the wayside, you don't make the effort. And then I think I need a little more hand holding, but,
He calls his garbage can the wayside.
Oh my God.
so, if you can share that, Chip, and let us know.
Will do.
I've been asked about, and this, at the American House where my day job is, I just took down the wreaths and the garland yesterday. So that leads me to, are we removing lights when the warm weather comes from the park, or what's?
Yeah, first response told me they were gonna start. I'll get an update from them, but they know they're supposed to do it this month.
There was a little chatter on Facebook recently about wanting us to leave the red, white, and blue lights on one of the trees.
I wouldn't recommend that, because the only way we can light those trees is by running extension cords across the lawn.
Okay.
And so we gotta pick it up.
I think at this point with the ones falling off the upper leaves and stuff, I say we just shut them off until they remove them, because it looks worse than it was.
Yeah,
In
okay,
my opinion.
good to know. That makes sense to me.
All right,
Yeah.
let's go around like Mr. Hawkins.
When do we start talking about Maple Festival? Next meeting?
That'll be 2 weeks before the festival.
Yeah, okay.
Are you doing committee appointments or not this time?
No, we'll do them next month.
Okay.
A couple of concerns. I'm still concerned with the upkeep of the Grand Union Shopping Center. I call it the Grand Union Shopping Center.
We know what you mean.
The downtown shopping center. And especially now, the way they've been storing snow. Because now they've taken away a lot of parking spots. And when the cars park in the fullest parking spot closest to the snow pile, cars cannot maneuver around from the post office around and then out the exit. And they have to stop, back up, go up, back up around the post office, come back down in front of the dollar store, and go through that entranceway. But that's one thing. And the other thing is, boy, our streets really have taken a hit this year, more than I have seen in a lot of years. Our streets are pretty bad right now, I think, and I'm a little worried.
I was gonna ask you about that, Marty, to build off that. When can you cold patch?
We've been.
Yeah, that stuff never works. That stuff
We've been
never
patching.
works.
But it,
In the last week, I mean, it works until you have to plow again.
Yeah.
And then you go back and hit them again. But it is, I mean, there's a lot of water out there, there's a lot of frost in the ground, so it shifted a lot of keep in mind, probably 60% of our streets have concrete bases. So like Congress Street, it lifts the concrete,
Yeah.
shifts the concrete. So wait until the frost is out of the ground and see where it settles.
It's gonna take I fear a lot of manpower, a lot of time and effort. There's a gaping hole at the bottom of the entrance into the shopping center. That I just go to the light now and turn up, so I don't go in it, but yeah, guys are gonna be busy doing that stuff in a few weeks. Nothing more for Ward 1.
just to build off that, Marty, nice job plowing sidewalks timely.
Oh yeah, sidewalks this year passed that very awesome.
Yeah, you jumped on those quick.
Oh, can I say one more thing? Did you take Ward 1 out of your Swanton map and put it back on the St. Albans map for paving this year?
I don't think it made it back.
Okay, all right. I was just wondering, because the last couple of years we've been kind of.
Messenger Street.
Okay.
From, I think, Lakeview to like Farrar. And then there's a couple of others. But the big question is, what do we want to do with Congress and
Yeah.
Upper Weldon. That's 50% of our paving budget.
Well,
We're gonna apply, but we've been told we probably won't get funded again, and we're probably more likely to get funded next year.
well, that's a staff
But we-
consideration, right? That's
but we
not a
keep
council
applying.
consideration, that's
Yes.
staff,
Right,
you guys will
That's
make
what I
that
say, we have
up,
to
yeah.
have that discussion.
How long is that resurfacing that you did on Upper Weldon last, as far as the temporary fix there?
Oh, 10 years.
10 years? I mean, that's been in great shape even after all the plowing and everything. It's in great shape still.
Did we pave that?
Last year, we
Yeah.
paved that from Barlow up to the town line.
Except for where they dug
It
it
was
down.
either that or it was gonna be crushed
No,
out.
it was, yeah, it needed it.
There's one spot in the upper portion that someone dug up a line or something like that.
We had a
couple
water
months ago.
break
Is
there
that what
last
it was? Yeah, I was like, always we pave it.
It's always the way it goes.
Yeah.
And since you compared me with Chad Spooner, I do have one more thing. Earlier, I'll be like Chad Spooner, and I'll have one more thing. We got something from somebody, in a council message that a roof was leaking or something like that. Does anyone recall what that was?
The Weldon Theater?
Oh, yes, it was a Weldon Theater. So, that made me think of, this building went through renovation, how many years ago, 5 years ago? And we've had to have the front porch done. And I'm wondering why we had to do that. That was all completely constructed as part of the renovation project, and within 5 years, we've now had to tear that down and rebuild that. And I'm wondering if we should be looking at the developer or the contractor to see if there's any reimbursement from
Are you
us
talking
for that.
stairs?
Yeah,
So we did. The year before, we took them out, they ended up cutting out several sections of the stairs where the rebar had bled through the steps. The other issue with those stairs was the design of them had that metal nosing on them for traction that allowed water to get in there and crack all the concrete. And it was a poor design by the engineers that did not design it.
okay. Like the sidewalks that a couple of people in my ward contacted you on,
Yeah,
same thing.
that's frost.
Yeah,
That's the base is there and everything, it's the frost shifting.
okay. And the roof on the Weldon, was that part of a rehab project?
No.
No, okay.
That was snow that had built up, and through the melt and freezing, water got captured underneath it, so we had to go up and shovel off that section.
And quick jump off that, any major costs associated with our ice freeze out here?
It's just repairing that drain.
Yeah. Okay, just curious.
It's leaking again today.
Yeah, because that drain leaks, that's in the roof, because the ice got under it, same thing thawing. We have a heat tape that is up there, but it froze the drain and lifted the drain, causing the water.
Gotcha.
Instead of going in the drain, comes around it.
I feel like those front doors are softer now.
Well, it'll be good to get back to an old-fashioned winter where we don't get any snow.
Right.
It's my fault, I sold my snowblower this year.
Trudy?
I went into Vermont Bakehouse this weekend. So many people were in there. It was really great to see that building being used as it was originally like designed and intended. So that was great. We had a nice lunch there. I have talked to a few business owners on Main Street because I try to frequent and go into new shops, and they're still seeing some crime as it gets warmer. The crime is ticking up, and I know the Public Safety Committee is kind of like taking a little pause this break, this season, but I think that we still need to like be on top of that because it's gonna probably happen again.
It's gonna escalate.
What's that?
It's gonna escalate.
Yeah, and one other thing, going down Canaan Street and turning left, if there are cars parked on this side of Kingman Street and you're trying to go down and turn left like by Nellie's, it's really hard, especially if there's like a big vehicle parked there. If you're turning left, you can't see.
There's not supposed to be.
Right
It's
in
like
the compact car space.
Supposed to be
No,
compact
but
cars.
like, there's usually like a big car there.
Yeah.
And when you turn left, it's like you're taking your life into your
Yeah.
own hands.
Yeah,
It's
it's
really,
definitely a problem.
There's signage there that says compact cars.
Yeah, it says compact cars, there's signs that say compact cars only.
well, that's why then. We don't enforce it.
The
Well, we
Federal
can
Street
tell.
Connector, does does that include putting a button out there for a sidewalk? Wouldn't that take away some of that?
Maybe.
Yeah, it's just, I'm waiting for like, there's gonna be an accident there.
Get rid of it.
Could. Not saying do that.
Nellie's in that, man.
I don't know.
Who's,
That's why we have compact.
Tim, who would I talk to about some ideas I have for like the city streets, making them prettier?
Okay.
Hi.
We talking what, trees and
Well,
flowers?
I watched Hometown Makeover when I was sick. Hometown Takeover. Yeah, murals, like places for people to take pictures, hashtag St. Albans City, like promote our town kind of thing.
Trudy, send an email to Chip and I, we can figure out who to get in the room for that. And there's some other.
And want me to tell you one other thing?
Sure.
Nice, like zigzaggy patio lights above a street, like maybe Kingman Street to highlight a street. So cute. Yeah, and then we won't have Marty's just like Trudy.
This is why we don't let Trudy travel.
Hometown takeover.
We should not let
Okay,
Trudy travel.
I'm done. I'm gonna send an email.
Sounds like she's gonna be on finance this year.
We get some donations from other communities.
Is that such a liability line for you?
Just so people know,
Contingency.
Chip is in conversations about murals
Yeah.
With high
Arlie-
school?
Yeah,
in our latest studio.
yeah, prominent build on Kingman Street, where we'd like to put them.
We're looking at other sites as well.
Please don't watch Bar Rescue.
I have watched that.
Trudy, you're set?
I am, thanks.
Thank you. Eric?
First off that one, have we done any more with arts ever since they left Ralston's? I know they were developing a good community and they were
One
talking
of the-
murals.
One of the people who was active with it is bringing back some activities.
Great. All right. My biggest news, I guess, is we picked a date for a block party, and it's July 13th. And I was thinking if there's any other counselors that want to throw parties in their wards on the same day, we could really kind of make it advertise a little bit bigger, kind of get it out there. Bob's has graciously donated the cost of meat, he's going to donate meat at cost and buns. So we'll have burgers and dogs again. Last year we had about 60 people, but this year we're going to aim much bigger. I wasn't sure of the turnout last year, so I didn't advertise as much, and we're doing more this year.
City block party and your host, your
I'm
hosting.
thinking we host them around the city, and everyone's got a spot. I mean,
could
you guys
rotate
put on
it.
the senior center.
We could rotate it every.
And that was the other idea, was rotating it around too, so maybe something to look at bigger
Yeah, I don't have a
space.
problem with
That'd be a fun idea.
Uh,
You can start it off. Okay.
I'm fine with that, yeah, that'd be fun. The other piece I had come up with me, someone reached out about taxis, concerns about the state of taxis, whether or not they have insurance, and you got me thinking with the insurance piece again. And Bennington has a taxi ordinance, actually speaks to insurance, it talks about the state of the taxi, it talks about annual registration. We charge $2 or $3 to register as a taxi in the city, which is fairly cheap, but we don't have a lot of ordinances around it. I was wondering if we could start looking into our ordinance and enhancing it a bit to improve on those components specifically, but
Would that include Instacart and DoorDash?
their definition is it's a motor vehicle regularly used, held out or used for hire by the general public for transportation of persons within the town, excluding vehicles, which we don't have this part, excluding vehicles used in intrastate or interstate transportation. So if they come from Burlington, they don't have to have our taxi license, but if they leave from here or they're in here, they would.
Yeah,
I know
I think it's a big issue.
in 2018, we lost a bunch of our taxis in town. These independent people went out of business, and being someone who worked in the bar, it affected the whole Kingman Street very negative. And we never really got late night taxis back, and it affected the foot traffic. Your decision to leave dinner and go to another establishment after, we lost a lot of that traffic. So I think taxis should be held to a standard, but we still haven't really got them back, and I don't really want to do anything that makes it harder to get them.
I think there's a couple taxi services in town which are doing really well. They have clean vehicles. I imagine they have insurance. There's a couple individual taxis that really give it a bad name, and those are the ones that people have, reported them pulling up to known drug houses, dropping people off long enough to go in and come back out and then driving
Yeah,
home.
for sure.
So it's like, that's more what I'm concerned with. I'm thinking that
The
ordinance doesn't need to
accountability
be
piece.
like a slap on the wrist of people doing it right. It's more of like, they're already doing all these things, let's just make sure these things are in the
Yeah.
rules that these other ones aren't.
I know the guy, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them, but
I brought that up about 5 or 6 years ago.
But we couldn't get we couldn't get a taxi out of here tonight. There's no one.
Well, G&G's around.
But what about
They
Uber?
shut down at a certain,
No Ubers either?
no Ubers and
It's
stuff.
not even worth it for Uber around here, really.
No, yeah.
But we used to have 2 that would be out
Or Lyft.
all night. They'd be out to 2.
Even if we had just an insurance component to it, honestly, I mean, that I think would negate a few of them.
Or dress code.
And if you had dress code in this, that's, I didn't know if we could look into it, that was one of the last things I had. I think actually it's, how many of the It's the Law signs do we have? I know we have one on Federal Street for crosswalks, and I know we take them out in the winter for plowing, but how many of those do we actually have altogether?
I don't know, we can look into getting some more.
You mean the ones you put on the crosswalks?
Right in the middle of the road, yeah. You had one on Federal last
We've got
year.
probably 3.
I was thinking the crosswalks across Main and Federal one would be beneficial because that's where I see people getting close to clipped almost all the time, including Taylor Park's crossing, honestly. It's not just
Never had a
Usually gives
problem
them something to aim at.
It's better than the pedestrian crossing to the side.
I've never had a problem crossing.
Yeah, I've come close.
I've seen one close call, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
it's the red hair.
I don't know. I'm from Worcester County. You just walk out. You don't really wait. When it's a green light, you just go. But here, I actually slow down now. So.
You're set, Eric?
Yep. Thank you.
Chad?
All right, just a couple quick things. I'd like to thank the city for voting for the drainage under Holt Park. It makes a big difference to a lot of people in my ward. These neighborhoods have been getting flooded out for as long as I can remember living here. So I'd like to thank everybody in the city for voting for that. The second thing is the courthouse parking. I talked to a couple of those business guys there, and they're saying those spots that are park mobile now, because they don't have a limit, people aren't moving. And so I think Dana reached out to you, Marty, are people getting ticketed, blah, blah, blah. I think people are getting ticketed, but you can continually increase your time. And so I don't know if those spots are being used by people in court, who have to do court or whatever. I'm sure they're parked legally because they probably keep renewing. But if we're looking for those spots to be spots for the businesses and not spots for the courts, should we put another zone in there? And maybe, given the nature of the businesses that are around there, maybe 30 minutes is too light, but maybe like we limit it to an hour a day. I don't know.
We just installed 4 one-hour spots.
Do they have a different?
They have signage, yeah.
Right, but if they don't have a different code, you can keep.
No, they don't have to pay for them.
It's free parking.
It's free parking for 1 hour. Those first 4 spaces as you pull into the lot on the left.
Oh, so you don't have to use Park Mobile for that?
No.
It was done to sort of mirror what was on Lake Street. Because you don't do park mobile on Lake Street.
It says.
Or, excuse me, Main Street.
It says parking for Lake Street businesses, right? And so this was
Is
led
that-
by
is
some
that-
of the businesses.
Is that hard to enforce though? I mean, basically then you have to,
He's out there from 8 to 5, so he's enforcing it along with all the other spaces.
How long ago did you get a call?
2 weeks ago?
Signs weren't up then.
Yeah, I might circle back to them and see. I mean,
Our signs
I'm
up
just
now?
wondering
Signs
how,
went up just about 2 weeks ago.
as cheap as Park Mobile is, I think, like when you put Park Mobile in those spots, like it's like 50 cents or whatever, it's not very expensive. I think if you made that all Park Mobile for an hour, you get a little revenue, then you'd almost have some automatic enforcement. I mean, the point is keep those spots rolling.
That would fly in the face of
Not
what
on
Park
those
Mobile's all
spots.
about, right? Yeah.
The core strategy of the city's parking program is we price our off-street parking way below the market,
Right.
like 50% below the market, to make it a no-brainer for people to park in those lots so that we can keep the on-street parking available for the merchants. And then the Lake Street merchants said, well, we don't have on-street parking, so we need some of the courthouse lot. So we gave them effectively the first 4 spaces in the courthouse lot. Now, we can give them more. We can give them as much as they want, but at some point, that lot has to be part of the long-term parking inventory, right?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I'm going the opposite direction. I think what I'm saying is that when you hit certain spots in Burlington that have Park Mobile, that have 30-minute parking, the whole point of that is to be in front, to get cars rotating in and out of those spots.
Agreed, but we don't have Burlington is paid parking everywhere. You know, so if we made the whole courthouse parking lot, for instance, 30 minutes short-term parking, so that, I know that's not what you're saying, but it switches around the core strategy of the parking program, which is the lots are not for the Lake Street parkers. The lots are supposed to be for the day-long parkers.
Right, but
I mean, those guys would like to have as much of the courthouse lot as possible be available for their business.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we should even add more, but I guess I would like to know how many people are being fined in those hour spots.
You think people are monopolizing the spots?
Yes.
Right, so that's.
I use Dana's, and it's always a mess. And as of 2 weeks ago when I went in there, I know I don't have a lot of hair to cut, but as in 2 weeks ago.
30 minutes.
You get the 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's how I know I can do 15 minutes on Park Mobile for 50 cents. Because it doesn't take long.
Actually, sometimes he says, just come back next week.
But so I've always, since Park Mobile's been there, I've always logged into my app and done whatever the minimum time is, because it doesn't take, and it's like, 50 cents or whatsoever. But the way it's coded out right now is, if I wanted to leave my car there for 3 days, I can keep increasing.
Why don't we do this? We'll let Sarah, it's late at night, we're approaching our no good decision, happens after 9 o'clock time. Let's let Sarah pull some data on this issue. I'm gonna circle back.
Sarah, I thought you might have been biting your tongue a little bit.
I am, but it's almost 9 o'clock, so we can circle back.
You need
Sorry,
to change
Sarah, I
that
didn't mean
clock tomorrow.
But don't forget, Chad, that's one of the benefits of Park Mobile, to be able to do that. And to be able to keep your car there and continue to pay for it, and this is the way the city can continue to get money.
And I agree with that. I agree with that at night. I agree with that in the parking garage. I agree with all of it. But there's some spots in Burlington where you need those spots to be moving, and those are the spots that Park Mobile allows you to set it at a 30-minute zone or an hour zone, and you can't re-park there. You can't re-up your zone for 24 hours because Burlington needs those spots moving.
Yeah. They're just a different zone, that's all they are.
They're just a different number.
Yeah.
So Sarah, pull some data to look at.
All right, Chad, do you have another topic that might be a little shorter?
No, I'm done. That's as short as I can get. I'm done.
That's it. Lindsay, we're gonna let you think about your list a little bit. We'll go to Marie.
Yeah, I'll keep mine short. Very happy to see that there are a few families that moved into the 175 Lake Street big building, so that's kind of nice. I saw a couple of days in a row kids coming out of there, so that was nice. And then any movement on the One Federal building at all? Is that still the restaurant? Any interest in that for anybody, or?
Not that we're involved in, there might be, but we're not involved in anything at this point.
And the food truck that did have a liquor license there is now in the town.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, they moved down to
Green
the.
Mountain.
They're across from Tap House.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're in that green.
Where are they?
Across from Tap
The
House.
one that's
Where
across from
that restaurant
The
is
diner.
across the street.
Oh, yeah, okay.
All right, Marie, anything
Other
else?
than that, that's, nope, things pretty quiet.
Lindsay, what's on your list?
Yeah, so this is my first meeting, so I don't have much for updates, but I can say that the sidewalks are always beautifully plowed in my ward. Yeah, everything seems good.
I didn't even have a packet for the first meeting, so you're lucky.
I shared mine.
That's hilarious. I have a printer one, so it's catch on the back.
I almost didn't have a packet.
Marty, I told Lindsay, I said, start off on a good note with Marty and I'll pay dividends.
Motion to approve minutes, 2/10/25.
Second.
Motion second. Any corrections, amendments, changes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain.
Motion to approve warrant 2/28/25.
Second.
Motion and a second by Trudy. Any questions or comments regarding the warrant? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned as of 8:57.
Did you get
Try
that?
again.
Did you get that one abstention?
Oh, yeah, 8:57.
I figured you did.
Yeah.